Hello, everybody. We are starting our, what is it, seventh broadcast? Wow, the time sure flies. Okay. Hope you're all having a great Wednesday so far. I know last night was kind of frustrating for many of you. I got a lot of emails from people that were struggling to upload their videos to the forum, but I think we got most of those problems sorted out. Many of you sorted it out on your own before I could reply. I do go to bed or stop looking at emails around 7:30. I do check off and on throughout the day. It is possible sometimes I might check at 4 o'clock and then not again until 7:30, um, and so on. So it seems like some more time might pass. I got a lot of emails around 8. I didn't reply to you until this morning. But in any case, many of you indicated that either you solved it or I helped you solve it earlier this morning, so I'm hoping that we're okay. I actually am a little guilty going into this because I have not checked my email, I think, since noon today. So if you email me after that point, noon on June 6th, I've not seen it yet, and I apologize. Okay, let's get this link going. I think I've wasted enough time with yabbing and gabbing and looking for the link. So let's get the link posted, and then we'll talk about um, what is coming down the pipeline. Okay, and we'll talk. There we go, and there is the unique link. Let's go ahead and post our announcements. Link to the seventh broadcast. Here's the link. Always have to write text in there if the email sees that I just have a YouTube link, they like to flag it as spam, and we'd hate for that to happen. So just give me a quick second here to finish sending out the link to everybody. Okay, I think we're good to go. All right, everybody has the link, so let's go ahead and pull up um, our PowerPoint for the day. Turn that off there. Okay, and we want to do the slideshow from the beginning. Let's swap that presenter view. Okay, and we'll move up the display capture. Shouldn't be too long this evening. So we're going to go over the persuasive speech in more detail. Hopefully it'll answer some niggling questions. We do remember that if you're watching this on June 6th, the topic is due tonight at midnight. Um, I do have made sure, one of the problems that I solved today was that a couple of you did not notify me that I didn't post the link in your respective section. That link to the discussion forum, it's in a discussion forum, has now been posted for you to submit your topic, specific purpose, and thesis statements. And we'll have another assignment that elaborates on that due on Sunday. But in any case, let's go over some more detail of the persuasive speech. But I also want to give a quick word about feedback. Um, this is not based on anything that I have seen so far in your interactions with others, but it's something I want to head off at the pass. Um, Mostly because some of this stuff has been in the news lately. By lately, I mean today. I really did just write this PowerPoint slide right before the other stuff I've had for a while. But I wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page about how to give good feedback, at least in terms of good feedback for the purposes of this course. So one of the first things that we need to do and make sure that we avoid as people that are giving feedback to others is that we want to avoid complinsults. Now, complinsults is of course a made-up word, but it's internet speak. But they are compliments that are really insults. And because I'm an academic, I've got to go ahead and make that more complicated by saying compliments that come from a seed of prejudice. So a couple of these compliments are things like, wow, your English is pretty good. Especially when said to somebody whose native language is not English. That comes from a certain seed of prejudice because if you look at somebody and you're like, oh, that person is definitely foreign. They're not going to speak English very well, and it's going to be awkward and difficult to listen to. And then they open their mouths and speak, good to English, and you're just so relieved that you don't have to try to struggle to listen to them that you decide to make that compliment. Wow, your English is pretty good. The compliment is diminished when it comes from the assumption that you're going to have a hard time listening to somebody. I hope that kind of makes sense, is that it's not really a compliment if the assumption that you're making before you make this compliment is that you're going to struggle to listen. So that's a kind of compliment that, regardless of what you think privately, you maybe don't want to say. In general, I've had a lot of international students over the years, and unless I'm specifically asked, and I know several of you have indicated that you maybe want to be an English education major, or any kind of education major for that matter. It goes to any skill, not just English language. Um, there is, if a skill is basic, and you are impressed that someone has um, accomplished that basic performance, that's not necessarily something you want to compliment. Not because I'm a curmudgeon and think that you should only compliment true exceptional performance, but because, again, if you're a teacher or instructor, you don't want to be the prejudiced person thinking, wow, this person's just going to mess it up bad. This scrawny kid, here, let's make a different example. This scrawny kid can't kick a football, and then it turns out they could kick it a totally average distance of several yards, and you're like, whoa! That was a good kick. You don't want to do that because that reveals that you were already thinking negative things about that person before they attempted to do the task that you set before them. So avoid comp insults like that. So if you're don't let anyone know your deepest, darkest, most pessimistic thoughts. All right, that's kind of the advice there. Um, another insult or comp insult that you can give someone, especially in this class, it's something that I've seen occasionally, like maybe once a year. But don't say things like, "Wow, I didn't think you'd make this topic interesting, but you sure showed me." Again, you kind of reveal to the peer person you're giving feedback to that you felt that their topic of choice was boring. And remember, this is someone that they're supposed to have knowledge of or interest in. And then, it turned out to be pretty interesting. You can say something more like, I really like how you related this topic to the audience. That would be fine. But don't say something like, wow, football is just awful to me, but man, you sure got me interested. Don't say that, because that reveals again a prejudice or a seat of prejudice in your mind. So that would probably be something that you don't want to broadcast to others and have them take offense at. Also, always show respect. Now I know that in some classes, as well, I mean by some classes I mean this class, we didn't really have an icebreaker activity where you got to say, hi, my name is Thomas Reginald Gandalf III, but all my friends call me Reggie. Um, Even so, if someone introduces themselves to you in this class or in any class or in any environment, and they tell you that they prefer to be referred to a certain way with a certain name, please do humor them in that. I mean, don't call Thomas Reginald Gandalf III, even though that's such a great name. If they prefer to be called Reggie, just go ahead and do it. So when you're writing this feedback, use the name that's on the forum or use whatever name they've preferred or they've introduced themselves in the video if they've done that. So if they've said to you, hi, my name's Reggie, but the title of the thread is by Thomas Reginald Gandalf III, go ahead and call them Reggie. Okay, that's actually a sign of respect. And another thing that shows respect is to acknowledge effort. And by that I mean don't say things like with you would know this if you had even bothered to read the book chapter. Um, Maybe it didn't come from a seat of mean-spiritedness. Maybe you were just trying to helpfully suggest that this person should read the book. But even so, like don't say things like that. Instead, say, It was you made a decent effort putting together this speech, but you can get more information on the format from the book. Okay, that's the kind of stuff that I would say. I wouldn't say things that implied that they didn't try to do work. Okay, the only time I ever like explicitly tell someone they didn't put in any effort in is when they just didn't turn something in, and I was pretty certain that it was a reflective effort on their part not to turn something in, which happens on occasion. But otherwise, don't try to imply. Try to check your language to make sure that you're not implying that people didn't apply themselves. All right. If they turn in work, acknowledge that effort. You don't have to tell them it was good if it's bad, but do acknowledge that they had attempted to and they invested energy in it. Okay. Finally, you want to use the sandwich. Tell them something that you liked about their speech, something that can be improved for next time, and then maybe something else that you liked. Um, Basically, I mean, you can't follow that pattern exactly every time. Every situation is going to be different. Every speech will be different. Every comment on that you're going to leave is going to be slightly different. And so maybe you can't follow, a like, an improvement, a like. It won't go that cleanly, but nonetheless, the idea is that you want to include both elements of, that was great, we should do that again, and you should avoid this next time in your critique. Don't do all one or the other. It's pretty useless to say, this was a great and awesome speech. I give you a consistent rating of 4 out of 5. Well, if it was a great, awesome speech, why are you dinging them a point, right? And that's the same kind of format that I follow as an instructor. I don't tell people that they did an absolutely flawless job and then give them a B, right? I have to tell them what I felt that they lost points on. So please do that. So be similar, but also at the same time, it's also very annoying to get a B and hear nothing but the criticisms as well, right? You do want to tell them what they did well, okay? Um, and finally, a critique absent of substantive criticism can also be taken as a compliment. And this is sometimes difficult because some people, like I said, a good critique has both elements of great, do that again, and you should avoid that for next time. Um, so that means that people are encouraged then to find something that you should avoid or something you should do differently. And maybe that something is going to be pretty silly, like I was distracted by the color of your t-shirt. That was a neon pink t-shirt and it was really distracting. That is not really a substantive criticism. I mean, but it shows that your critiquer was trying to find something that you can improve for next time. So if the worst thing that they have to say about your speech is your choice of color on your t-shirt, then you can internalize that as meaning there was really nothing that you could improve in an important way. And I mean, also, you probably shouldn't wear very loud clothing unless you have a specific reason to do so. And sometimes choosing clothing can be part of your message, but we'll maybe ruminate that on another time. Um, so there we go. That's come a quick word about feedback. Again, I think that the golden rule is don't talk to somebody the way that you would like to be talked to, or talk to somebody the way you would like to be talked to. If you find yourself writing words that you would rather not see on your own evaluation, then maybe you shouldn't write those words. All right. Now, again, remember, you don't have to call something good if you don't like it, but you do have to state your criticism in a way that shows respect and acknowledges effort. All right, so Toolman model of argumentation. This is the format for how you can structure all of your main points in your persuasive speech. And we'll go over exactly how um, those this kind of applies to your main speech in a moment. But when we talk about when I want you to make an argument, this is what I'm talking about. You're making a structured three-part point, all right, a structured three-part paragraph, if you prefer, that contains these following elements, all right? You want to have, when you're trying to persuade somebody, you want to have a claim, a statement that you want your audience to believe. Then you want to follow that up with data, which is some kind of verifiable evidence, proof, research, or information that you believe supports your claim. And again, the verifiable part is important. Okay, so for us, this usually means something that's published and from a credible source. I'm really depending a lot on your high school English and maybe your college English teachers about that went over how you identify a credible source versus a non-credible source. I mean, basically, you can boil that down to if somebody's work has to be edited, whether it's in a newspaper or a magazine or an academic journal, it's pretty credible. If somebody's work does not have to be edited in order to be published, then it's probably not very credible. So that would mean, blogs, especially, and blogging has become different. I know a lot of experts in their fields now do blogs. Diane Ravitch, I'm pretty sure none of you know that name, but she was the Assistant Secretary of Education under President George W. Bush. And she maintains a blog in which she reviews um, educational research. So it's a very credible blog. So not all blogs are bad, but its credibility is based on her previous scholarship and acknowledgement of her expertise. So unless you have a blog from somebody like that, somebody who's a acknowledged, widely acknowledged expert in the field, and they are commenting on their field, then blogs are usually not a good source. But again, anything that needs to be edited or looked at by a different person from who wrote it is usually pretty good, credible, verifiable evidence. Verifiable is like the idea of being published and credible together. Okay, so an academic journal, everything's peer reviewed, so that's verifiable and credible. Again, magazines and newspapers are verifiable and credible. They're published, and several editors went over that article, fact checking it. I mean, mistakes are still made, but they fact check it before it is published. Um, that's why when CNN published a story that was demonstrably false about how a certain Trump administration official might have been misusing funds, um, that the editor and the entire department got in trouble because that meant the oversight that gave CNN its credibility had broken. So all those people lost their jobs. All right. Um, so again, the idea is that newspapers and news sources are okay, are good for this. Don't let the fake news thing um, get into your skull too much. But again, anything that's edited or looked at by a different person than who wrote it is considered a credible source. Whereas something that you don't need any editing or don't need any supervision, like a blog, is probably not that credible. Okay, and then finally, you have a warrant. Okay, a statement can be more. This is a statement where you explain how the data validates your claim, and sometimes it can take more than one sentence to do this, but that's okay. You need this element in here. You need to actually link your data to your claim. You need to say, this information that I have presented definitely validates what I want you to believe because insert reason. Okay, so we'll go through a quick little example here. So let's say, and this is maybe a situation that many of you have been in, you want to take your parents' car out on the town. You're in high school, I guess, and you want to take your parents' car out on the town on a Friday afternoon. So you make the statement, you say, Mom and Dad, you should trust me with the car on this Friday afternoon. I want to take it to Dairy Queen and meet some friends. Now, the data you might suggest for that is that, the last time I took the car out for an unsupervised trip with friends to Dairy Queen, I came back with it intact. Okay. Now, a lot of people at that point will drop the mic and walk away. They think that it's done, that they've demonstrated their point. And this is where the warrant comes in. Remember, your parents, they love that car, or maybe it's the only car that your parents have. So they're pretty hesitant, even though they seem to have done it once before. They might be pretty hesitant to give that car to their 16-year-old child. So with no supervision. So they're probably pretty skeptical. They might be thinking, well, even a broken clock's right twice a day. It was a coincidence that you brought it back okay. So you need to explain why your previous outing in that vehicle is a reason to let you have the vehicle this time. And so you might explain that with a warrant saying, well, since I brought it back the first time, I have shown that I am capable of making mature decisions when I have this vehicle that we own. Right? And it might be something simple and no doy type explanation like that. but you do need to have that explanation. Another example, I coached the debate team, and we were doing a debate exercise where we wanted, the claim was that Ball State University had enough parking spaces for everybody, and the data that we found for that was that there are 20-some thousand students and 30,000 parking spaces on campus. All right. Now, again, a lot of people would drop the mic and walk away. They would rely on the audience just kind of figuring out how that information related to the claim. But you still need to do the warrant, the reason. So the full argument would say something like, no, Ball State University has enough parking spaces for people. The data is that there's 20,000 students and there are 30,000 parking spaces. And the reason why that's enough is because there's more parking spaces than there are people at the university. And then you can drop the mic and walk away. All right, because sometimes, especially when the audience is skeptical, humans don't necessarily, especially if they're predisposed to believing that there's not enough parking at Ball State, they're going to be predisposed to thinking that there isn't enough. And so when they hear information contrary to that, they can probably pretty effectively ignore it. So you really need to explain why 20,000 is a smaller number than 30,000. All right. This also means you can have a more in-depth discussion if you're going to have especially a controversial topic, because the warrant says, well, there's 20,000 students and there's 30,000 spaces, therefore there's one number is bigger than the other and there's enough room for everybody. But then maybe your opponent or a skeptical person in the audience might say, well, yeah, but there's also a few thousand faculty and staff that work here too. Did you count them in your reckoning of whether or not there are enough spaces? And then maybe the answer to that question is no, and you need to go back and re-examine some more data, right? And that's a reason why you always want to make sure that you have all three parts of this put together, because it can lead to more productive discussion. And especially for you in this class, you're not going to have really a discussion, but it prevents people that are maybe predisposed to disagreeing with you. It kind of shuts down their natural, I really don't want to connect this data. I don't want to connect the dots on my own. I really don't like this. I don't like this claim. I don't want to connect the dots. You have to force them to connect the dots by saying the warrant, the statement. All right. This is the most common way that students lose points, is that they'll do these two steps and then they'll forget this one. So please don't do that. Okay, so now more specifically to follow Monroe's motivated sequence, which is the pattern of organization that we want you to follow for your persuasive speech. So it's not just enough that you have claim, datas, and warrants. You've got to make specific kinds of claims, datas, and warrants, specific kinds of arguments. All right. So specifically, here's what you should do for your speech. You have this need step, right? Remember we talked about last time how there are two basically main points. One is a need and the other is a solution. So in your need step, you need to make an argument that you think would make the audience believe there is a need to change. Specifically a need to change from the status quo. And the status quo is a vocab word from your textbook that means the way things are now. So you're making an argument that says the way things are now is not good, right? If you're to reword that. You want to make the audience uncomfortable with the status quo. People should feel bothered that there is injustice or in the world, all right, that they should feel bothered that there are puppy mills in the world. People should feel bothered that music therapy isn't taken seriously. People should feel bothered that people continue to smoke in barred in areas where that's prohibited, right? They should feel uncomfortable with that situation. All right. So that's your first. It doesn't necessarily need to be your first argument in terms of the chronologically in your speech, but it needs to be in your need step. It needs to be somewhere in your first main point. The second thing you need to make sure is in your first main point, is an argument that you think would make the audience believe that change is not going to happen on its own. Okay. So you need to also make the argument that the world as it is not going to just fix itself. This is not a temporary condition. unless something happens, unless some change happens that we as human beings start, then the world is going to continue to be this unjust way, or the world is going to continue to experience this inefficient thing, right? That's how you need to. That's the second argument that you need to make, right? That's what really makes people be motivated to change. Again, these two arguments, they can kind of come in any order within your first main point, but you need both of them in order to really succeed, to really demonstrate how your need step in your Monroe's motivated sequence works. For your solution step that we talked about next time, you need to make an argument that the specific action that you recommend as part of your speech would result in the thing that you've identified, the problem that you were talking about, would go away. You also should explain each part of a plan or your call to action, however you want to phrase it, that you want the audience to take. So who should take the action? Again, one of the people that should take the action might be the audience, but it also might be, the Supreme Court. It could be Congress. It could be other people other than the audience, but generally you should include the audience in as part of your plan or as part of your call to action. So what exactly should this person or group of people should they do? What should they be doing? All right, according to you. Okay. And are resources required in order to do the thing that you want? And if so, what are they and where and how can they be acquired? So for example, if your plan is to have the audience sign a petition, well, the resource they need is the petition. So where can they get access to it? That kind of thing. You'd be surprised how a lot of people leave this step out of their solution. Like we should all sign a petition that makes Ball State, ban smoking. Now this was a topic many a year ago. All right, I'm sorry I'm harping on it, but the student in this particular case, they forgot this part. Where is the petition? What does the petition say? How do I sign it? Where do I know I can stand with this idea? Right? They forgot that part. So if any resources are required, regardless of what it is, make sure that your audience knows how they can get it. If you want to prohibit or encourage something, how should you enforce this change? So even if you want the audience to personally stop doing something, so for example, if you want the audience to drink less alcohol, you also need to explain how they can enforce their own behavior. How can they avoid, in this case, temptation? What are the things that they can do to make it more likely that they won't drink alcohol? Because as you may know, if you're giving a persuasive speech about, say, alcohol cessation or hard drugs cessation, cessation means that you stop taking them or stop um, ingesting them. You need to explain. You can't just say, well, just stop doing it. The many PSAs did that in the 90s, and the opioid epidemic is much worse now than it ever was. So make sure that you have some kind of a plan with these other things besides, you should just stop. That helps people get resources to change and alter their behavior, or tricks and tips about how they can change and alter their behavior beyond they should just cut it the F out. So solution step continued. After you're done kind of detailing all that stuff, you need to make the argument that the problem can be solved or mitigated. A lot of instructors might also explain this as an argument that shows the plan or what you want to do is workable, that this is something that if we all participate in it and we get the backing that we need, we'll have results. All right, so you need to make that argument. And again, at this point, because we're about to shift gears just ever so slightly, when I say make the argument, and here and in these other steps here, I'm saying make one of these, a claim, data, and warrant set. All right, this is kind of like a paragraph if you want, that each one of these is a sentence. All right, so when I say make an argument that you think would make the audience believe, you're making a claim with data and a warrant, okay, for each of those things. Let's see here. When you get to your conclusion, you start by reviewing all the claims made in the speech. So again, the claims, because of the way you're making a persuasive argument, your claims are going to be basically your topic sentences. All right. So just like you did for your informative speech, you will just go over the statements as you review the speech. And then you highlight, I'm not sure why I thought this was 2 words at the time, but you will highlight why action is needed now. Why should we take action now? So if that is one of your claims, then congratulations. You kind of done this already, but if this idea is not a claim, then you need to explain it here as you conclude your speech. And then call the audience to start action after you have concluded your speech. Don't tell them to wait for someone else or something else to happen before they get started. Have your audience do something. Maybe you want to reverse the decision that the Supreme Court made about the whole cake shop deal with validating how the cake shop did not have to serve people who were getting gay married, and you want them to reverse that decision. Well, obviously, you can't. Your plan can't be, well, let's all try to get on the Supreme Court, right? That's not realistic. So your call to action might be to have people start a letter writing campaign to the bakery to say, I think that you should serve those people anyway. Or something like that. Have something that the audience themselves can actually do to get started. It could be if you're giving a speech about the people people that need to get help for an opioid addiction. All right, let's talk about another subject that's in the news. Maybe you can tell the audience that right after this speech, if you have someone that has these symptoms, maybe it's time to have a talk with them about this, or about getting help. Right? Call the audience to do something that's realistic for the audience to do, something that's realistic for college students to do. A letter writing campaign, a petition, having a conversation with a friend, something that you think that they can get started on. Even though if another part of your plan might be to, increase police enforcement at pharmacies, right? That can definitely be part of it, but give something for your audience that they can do to start the change that you want them to do. All right. Okay. Some other details for the speech that are not content related. The speech will be worth 175 points. You need to utilize at least 4 different types of support. By the way, these other requirements, I'm going to post this PowerPoint as well. So if you're watching the archive, which seems like most of you will be because I only have one person watching right now, and I think that one person is myself. These requirements are also in your book on page 45, or your workbook on page 45. So you can find them there as well. And you need to utilize at least 4 different types of support. Again, hopefully you've read the chapter 9 by tonight, so you kind of know what I mean by when I say that. So you need to use, an example here, an anecdote there, and so forth. At least 4 different types of support throughout your speech. You need to have 5 spoken source citations. Preferably, and I've changed this from what the book says. So they want 5 spoken source citations from 5 different sources. We're not quite there yet. Usually this persuasive speech assignment comes at the very end of the semester, and they've done something called a group speech related to their topic beforehand, so they have tons of sources and research material that they've collected. We have not done that because you've been working individually, so I'm going to take down that requirement. You still need to have a source citation 5 times. I still want you to say, according to Fareed Zechariah and Time Magazine from October 2016, you still need to do that stuff 5 times, but you only need to find 3 different research sources. All right, so you can find, and again, I don't care what type of research source it is. Like you could use all magazines, but they have to be 3 different magazines. You can use 3 different journal articles, but they again have to be 3 different journal articles. So I definitely recommend mixing and matching, but you need 3 different sources. The time limit for this speech is 6 to 8 minutes. I've kept that the same, again, because As many of you gave me feedback as you were working on your informative speech, the issue was that you maybe had too much information. And you were able to fill the time easily. It was cutting things out that was the challenge. So um, given that, this group seems inclined to that, I've gone ahead and made the time limit the same. Again, 6 minutes is not necessarily very long. It's basically a minute for each argument that you need to make, because you need to make 4 arguments. I diagram that on the next slide. You need to make 4 different arguments, so that's 4 minutes there, and then you have a minute for an introduction and a conclusion, and that's your 6 minutes right there. It is not really a lot of time, so please don't be intimidated by that. I kind of suspect, again, that you will have a lot of people that are wanting advice about how to cut stuff out of their speech, to be honest. Probably you won't have trouble filling the speech. In any case, you need a visual aid required. We'll just talk about that on Sunday. We don't have time for that this evening, but we will be required to submit a visual aid. It does not need to be visible in your recording, because I'm very sensitive to the fact that many of you do not have a second monitor on which to display a visual aid. So we will have you turn it in as if you were going to use it, but you will not need to have it on your broadcast. Okay. So your assignment for Sunday, 11:59 p.m. I want you to brainstorm and write out word for word the claims you want your speech to have. And in order to do this, so that means that if you want to make the claim that Ball State University has more than enough parking for everyone, then you need to write all of that out word for word in a reply to your own thread on the Persuasion Topic Forum. You need at least 4 claims. Remember, there are 2 for the need main point and 2 for the solution main point. So again, let's go back and look at those slides. There's, for the solution, since we're going backwards, there's an argument that the problem can be solved, that some action can be taken, can be effective. And then there's an argument that says the action I have identified will make this problem go away. I know those sound very similar, and in a way they are, but this one is more about getting these details together, advocating for a certain type of thing that should happen, whereas this is kind of solidifying the idea that it'll work. Okay, so there's 2 arguments there, and then there's 2 arguments here as well. Make an argument that you think the audience would believe there is a need to change, and an argument that you think that the audience would believe that change is not going to happen on its own without action. Okay, so those are the 2 arguments. So you need at least 4 arguments, 4 claims for Sunday. Okay. All right. I believe that's it. Again, I don't even think anyone's really in the audience right now, so this is all I had to go over. Again, if you continue to have issues, go ahead and email me. I know that Blackboard is being not very cooperative in terms of letting you submit speeches. My advice, and I've told several people this, but my advice is that if it says an error, specifically if it says that the file is too large, just go to YouTube. Any Google account, any Gmail account is also a YouTube account. So just go to YouTube, log into your Gmail as your YouTube account, and upload your speech there, and then give the link. Especially with this speech being 6 to 8 minutes long, if you haven't had an issue with the size, we might very well on this speech. So I'm just throwing that out there in case this has not happened to you yet. All right, on that cheery note, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for the evening. Thank you so much for all your work so far. I really appreciate the level of involvement you've had. I know that when a class is online, it is easy to feel disconnected, but I don't necessarily feel disconnected. You folks write me in pretty well, and when I look to check up on your assignments, if you're submitting them, I've seen near 100% of them being turned in, or at least being accounted for, by the time the due date rolls around. So I really appreciate that, and I thank you for it. So have a great evening, and I'll see you on Sunday.